Pens you can try is called a dip pen. It's called a dip pen because the ink is loaded into the pen by simply dipping this metal part, which is called a nib, into the bottle of ink. The dip pen is made out of a couple different parts. So the nib being this metal part where the ink is stored and where the ink comes out to make the lines and the texture. The pen handle being the part that you hold onto. And then where the nib gets stuck into the pen handle, this part is called a ferrule, just like a paintbrush. There are all different kinds of dip pens out there. They are used for different purposes. There's all different kinds of nibs out there as well. One of the things that you could explore is calligraphy. If you really decide that you like pen and ink in this project with the dip pens, I would encourage you to come to Art Club and check out the different nibs and different pen handles that I have, and you could try out some calligraphy there. We are of course going to be using the dip pens for art, and we're going to be exploring the Quill pens because they have a really delicate point and they're great for producing detailed work. For right now, we're using the Quill pens, and I want to talk to you about the two different nibs that you'll be able to use for the project. I also want to discuss a little bit more in detail how the nibs work. So the cool thing is that with these pens, you can reload them constantly with ink just by dipping them into the ink. And when you dip them into the ink, you really want to only dip them as far as this little opening here is. You don't want to dip it up to, where the pen handle starts. And once it's dipped in there, the ink will be stored in this little opening and then also on the underside in this concave area as well. How the ink gets from there and creates a nice defined line onto your paper is by adding pressure to the nib. The metal splits into two prongs, and those two prongs lead up to where that little opening is in the metal. And so simply by adding that pressure, it creates this little chute, this little channel where the ink can travel down, and then as you pull the pen, you'll create a line. So we have two nibs. One is more rigid, one is more flexible. The more rigid one is going to be better for like really thin, controlled lines where you don't want the line weight to change very much. So this is the more rigid nib. You'll notice that it has a round opening here, whereas the other one has more of like an ellipse shape. You'll also notice when you push down on it, it's just not very flexible. You can't push very far. The line can only get so thick. There's only so much flexibility within the line weight with the pressure that you can apply. The other nib, which is much more flexible, although there are many more nibs out there that are much, much more flexible. But for the Quill pen, this one's pretty flexible. And so if I just apply a tiny little bit of pressure, I could make a nice thin line, but I can also press harder and get a thicker line. And I can also, change my pressure up and kind of, go gradually from thick to thin or thin to thick lines. And so this allows you some ways to control the line weight within your drawing.